My name is Eric. My name is Eric Wan. Welcome to our webinar. I'm the Principal Consultant of RDI Worldwide. And today's topic is Millennial and Gen Z in Korea, Trends, News, and Insight. So thank you for being here. This webinar is something that I've planned out for the past couple weeks now. And the purpose of this webinar is to run this type of session on a monthly basis, and with the aim to create a community of professionals where we can share knowledge, information, and insight based on this particular topic. And this is a very important topic for me personally and professionally, because I believe that is something that is important when it comes to generational diversity in the workplace in Korea or worldwide. And what I've planned for you today is some news research that we've found and some additional insight that we have generated, and we want to share that with you. And if you have any questions or comment, feel free to participate and use the Q&A box or the chat box as well. Without further ado, so in the June edition of this executive webinar, what I've planned for you today is a little bit of general outlook into the changing landscape of the population diversity when it comes to Millennial and Gen Z in Korea, and also what are some of the implications that is involved. And then I would like to share with you some research that were found based on the perspective on work after COVID-19, right? So the difference between when it comes to changing jobs, and also the perception of non-permanent work and versus permanent work. Has that changed in recent times? And more importantly, is that a change in perspective when it comes to staying in the company for Korean Millennial and Gen Z? And for the later part of this session, I would like to share with you a bit of a Gen Z persona. There's some research done by a marketing company in Korea and how they see Gen Z as customers, and more importantly, what is the implication on that when it comes to having Generation Z in the workplace. Mostly based on two topics that I want to talk about, which is trust. Who do they trust? Where did trust come from when it comes to Gen Z, which is important when it comes to leadership, as well as when it comes to general employee engagement. And the second thing I want to talk about is the social awareness motivation that the Gen Z have in Korea. I wanted to share with you few examples that where the intrinsic motivation can happen and do happen when it comes to Generation Z in Korea. Some of you have already sent me some questions in advance, so thank you for doing that. And I will look to address some of those questions during the webinar itself, or during the presentation itself, and also in the Q&A session as well. And just like to start with a little bit of a snapshot on the Korea population when it comes to generation distribution. So if you look at the graph here, it's something that came from 2019. So you see that if you look at the population as a whole in the Korea Peninsula, that we have a lot of Millennial and Gen Z. We're talking about almost 44% of the entire Korean populations are made up of this particular age group. So that could be a couple of things, right? So when I look at this graph, I see two things, because if we are looking at defining millennial as somebody who is born between 1981 to 1999, and Generation Z is somebody who is born after that, right? So we're looking at somebody who's born in the year 2000. If we look at this data, then we can realize for a fact that in 2021 there is a very good chance that the Generation Z are entering the workplace, if not already working alongside you. And if you have been following this topic in Korea for some time, in Korea for some time, then you will notice that it's not something that I particularly agree with. They tend to lump these two groups together. They call them MZ. They call them Millennial and Gen Z. I felt that it's not a fair term to describe them because they are two very, very distinctive, different generations. If you look at the gap, right, there is clearly a gap between Gen Z and Millennial when it comes to their preferences, when it comes to how they see life and how they see work. So I would like to, I actually much prefer to separate them when it comes to talking about Gen Z and when it comes to talking about Millennial. So that makes, sometimes that makes work for us a little bit difficult because a lot of the literature, a lot of the research do lump these two groups together. But we're trying to separate those groups today because I feel that there is an important distinction, and I'll show you some research later on when it comes to the perspective on work. There is a clear difference when it comes to these two groups. Another thing that I've noticed when it comes to the Korean population is the growing importance of millennials in the workplace. And when I say the growing importance of millennial is because the millennial generations are becoming leaders themselves. I think there's we have to be very, very clearly accept the fact that the millennials are stepping into executive and sometimes in leadership manager roles. And some implication behind that is they are sometimes stuck in between two generations. They are stuck between the generation of Gen Z, and also at the same time, they're stuck between the generation that came before them, namely the baby boomer generation. But when it comes to the changing landscape, right, we think about the changing landscape of work and population in Korea. I think it is important for all of us to realize that age diversity, right, just different age group working together. It's not a choice really, right? It's a reality now. It's happening whether if you like it or not. Gen Z are coming into the workplace and millennials are becoming managers, leaders, executives themselves. So so for company, there's a choice to be made, right? So because when I say there's a choice to be made, what did I mean? What did I mean when I say there's a choice to be made? Because I've done this type of workshop, webinar, seminar before the lockdown for the past, since 2018 and 19 now. And every time I do this type of a workshop or session, I always receive a question from some leaders, and they say, "Oh, why does it always have to be us, the older generation, that have to adjust to the younger generation? Why can't they understand a little bit better as well? Why are we being forced to adjust to the younger generation?" And I always tell them that nobody's forcing you to do anything, right? I mean, it's a choice. It's always a choice when it comes to making change in our life. It's always a choice when it comes to diversity. So just like some company, they choose to focus on millennial and Gen Z customers because they realize that if they don't make this decision, if they don't make this choice to focus on younger customer, the fact is they will lose customer, right? Because the upcoming Gen Z and millennial will become will spend money, and they will become a force to reckon with when it comes to being a consumer, right? It's a choice to be made. You can choose not to focus on them. I'll just focus on the older generation. It's fine, right? But if you don't make this choice, then obviously you will lose some customer. And it's the same thing for company, organization, and leader as well, right? I mean, if you choose to focus on millennial and Gen Z employee, then obviously then you will be able to get the best out of them. And also you can make the choice of not focusing on them, right? But the reality behind that is data have shown that they are a generation, millennial and Gen Z are a generation who is a lot more fluid when it comes to choosing workplace, and also when it comes to company loyalty. They are actually quite different from the previous generation. And it's a fact that if you choose not to focus on them, then you will lose talent in both the short term or the long term, right? So again, generational age diversity is a reality, right? The choice is remaining for the leaders and company to make, do they want to focus on it or not? And so that's the first thing when it comes to this generation shift, a generation changing of the landscape. And the second thing is I already talked about is the millennials are becoming leaders themselves. The millennials are stepping into executive managerial positions. And that presents problem. There are not problem. I would say that present opportunities, and there's also some area that we need to be careful with, right? More specifically, so there's a hashtag that created a lot of buzz in the international global internet community. The hashtag is the geriatric millennials. If you have heard about this, then I don't know if you heard about this particular hashtag. So it came in April April this year, where Erica Darwin, this writer, she used this term of geriatric millennial to describe millennial leaders. And not in a negative kind of a way. She never meant to describe millennial as somebody who's out of touch, or with somebody that is in a geriatric kind of a situation where they are very, very old, or like a dinosaur kind of a mindset. She didn't mean it this way. But of course, right, when you do things on the internet, sometimes your intention and impact can have very, very different results. But what she meant is millennial will become a very, very important part of the workplace because of their, as I said earlier, because they can be the gap between the Generation Z and the older generation. And that enable, and if companies do want to focus on the next generation, there are a couple of things that they need to consider. First thing that they might want to consider is the organization ready for this type of change, right? When it comes to embracing the next generation, are they ready for it? Both on a organization level and also on a personal level when it comes to the leaders. Are they ready for it, right? Are they ready for it? Second thing is, as millennials are becoming leaders, do they have the leadership capability, right? So something that is becoming more of a concern for company now, and also at the same time opportunities, right? Because we can use this geriatric millennials to bridge the gap to really achieve generational diversity. Some company are already doing it. Some company have what they call a junior broad members, where they have specifically younger generations to be part of the executive team. Again, these are things that you need to consider if you are, is your organization ready for it, right? These are the kind of things that organization need to think about. And also that when it comes to millennials, are they ready, right, to take on a leadership kind of a role? Because as I say earlier, Millennial and Gen Z do have a difference when it comes to work preferences and how they approach life. Which is something that I want to share with you in this June 2021 edition of webinar. When I say June 2021, it's because we aim to run this on a regular basis. We wanted to give you our community the most up-to-date information. So we want to, hopefully you stick around for the next webinar and the one beyond. But for this particular June agenda, something I want to share with you. The first is the perspective change on work. Is it a change when it comes to career before COVID and after COVID? And if so, what's the change, right, when it comes to Gen Z and millennial in career? Is some permanent job is something that I also want to talk about. The perception of non-permanent job and permanent job is something that there is a perspective change as well that I want to share with you today. Gen Z profile, a bit of a Gen Z persona profile, and what does that mean when it comes to them in the workplace? What are some of the things that you could be doing but not doing at the moment? So yeah, so perspective change since COVID-19, right? So is that a difference between pre-COVID and post-COVID when it comes to changing jobs? So for Millennial and Gen Z, so the answer to that question is yes, there's a difference. There is a change in that. So Deloitte has recently run a research on this particular topic in the report, and what they have found is this particular interesting data, right? So what you see is, so you see on the left-hand side graph is, they ask the questions of, would you consider leaving your company in the next 2 years, within 2 years? And what we see that is for millennials in Korea, that number have dropped post-COVID-19 from 52% to 38%. So Korean millennials are less likely to leave the company within the next 2 years in 2020. And because Gen Z were not working in 2019, 2018, so they don't have the data for 2019. However, it's worth noting, it's worth taking a note that 58% would say that they are most likely to leave the company within 2 years. So the number is pretty high, right? So if you have Gen Z in the workplace, then there's a very good chance that they will leave your company within the next 2 years. The second graph, what we looked at is how likely you to be staying in your company in the same company after 5 years. So this we're talking about long-term retention here. So bad news here is even though they are less like millennials, even though Korean millennials are less likely to leave the company in the next 2 years, they are more likely to leave the company after 5 years. They won't stay for more than 5 years, comparing to the data from 2019. So even though they won't leave for the short term, what they're looking at is they might not stay for the long term as well, especially not past the 5-year mark. This is so Korea is actually quite interesting on a global scale because Korea is the only country when it comes to the 5-year retention rate. Korea is the only country that is going against global trend. So the global trend actually increased. So more millennials around the world are more likely to be staying in the same company after 5 years, but Korea is the only country that drop when it comes to this number. So, and overall, Korea do worse when it comes to retention. So if you look at the for both Millennial and Gen Z, we'll see that Koreans millennials are more likely to leave than their global counterparts, 7% higher versus the global average of 31%. And for Gen Z is 8% higher. So Gen Z globally do not do well when it comes to 2-year retention. They do, as I said earlier, they do change job much quicker than millennials. When it comes to staying in the same company after 5 years, Korea do worse globally, comparing to the international counterpart, 30% lower. So it's actually much worse than the global counterpart, Korean millennials. And Korean Gen Z also, so the global average is 21%. 21% of global Gen Z would stay in the company after 5 years. Not a high number, but Korea also do worse in this regard when it comes to Gen Z. So what we can draw from that is from the same research. Why do Korean millennial are less likely to change jobs comparing to pre-COVID-19 in the next 2 years? So Deloitte have made some speculations. We can agree or disagree, but these are some of the suggestions. Is that Millennial and Gen Z do see themselves a lot more financially responsible, particularly millennials. So there's a good chance that because of the impact caused by COVID-19, that they don't see short-term change is something that is responsible for them financially. However, a couple of things that we could potentially be a little bit more careful with is, even though millennials are less likely to change, because they might believe that it's unwise to change within the next 2 years, they do have an eye on, Korean millennials do have an eye on the on making long-term changes in their career. So 3 to 5, so after the second year, 3-5 years is a bit of a critical period when it comes to retention, right? So you have to pay particular attention behind that to see to pay a little bit more attention when it comes to retaining them in those critical periods, because they don't see themselves staying in the same company after 5 years. For Gen Z, likely to change in the short term, and also don't see themselves in the having a long-term future in the company. So that means more effort when it comes to engagement and retention. And my general recommendation, our general recommendation for retaining employee is you gotta be on the pulse with this kind of things, right? When it comes to engagement and retention. When I say on the pulse is a lot of company, they do engagement survey or they do employee satisfaction survey, maybe twice a year, once a year, or every quarter. So because of the, especially for Gen Z, because of how likely they are to change job, then I think it's important for leaders and organization to be on the pulse. So when I say on the pulse, it means literally keeping a hand on the pulse, to be constantly be aware that they could be making this change, right? So employee survey is important. I think it will be helpful to give you some data to work with, but a lot of the responsibility will fall on the managers themselves to keep. When I say the responsibility fall on the leaders, the managers themselves, is to keep an eye on the employees, right? Need to have a conversation on career, a conversation on engagement a lot more frequently. And also leaders need to have the ability to not just talk about work, right? But talk about employees' career, the career directions and how they feel about the company that they work with themselves. So these are some of the things that leaders might need to take more attention with, particularly with Gen Z. Like, be ready to have that kind of conversation on a more regular basis, because if you only do survey once or twice a year, if they leave in the middle, then you cannot catch those moments when they're leaving, right? So some of you may be interested in why do they change companies, particularly for Gen Z. So Job Career did a survey on and they also found the similar kind of a data when it comes to Gen Z. Most of them would leave between 1 year to 2 years, 58%, I think is the numbers. And when they asked them in depth on why do you leave? Like, what causes the change? In what causes you want to change your company? Two main reasons. One is the work culture. When I say work culture, a little bit around the relationship with the superior and also how work is being done in the workplace. And the second thing is maybe it's not surprise, it's a common theme when it comes to people changing company, is compensation. So that includes salary, benefits, and also holidays. Those are the things that are the main reasons that Gen Z have decided to change the workplace in such a short period. So those are some of the insight that I wanted to share with you regarding the difference between millennials and Gen Z in Korea regarding career change. Another thing that I want to share with you today is the perception of permanent jobs. So let me just look at the list of participants today. So we got some international attendees today. We also have some Korean names. So a little bit of context. So in Korea, permanent job and non-permanent job, there's a difference when it comes to contract, and also when it comes to the benefits and the compensation involved. Job Korea recently did a survey for Korean Gen Z, right? So when you're focusing on Korean who graduated in the past 3 years, from 2021, and what they found out is 80% of them would apply to a non-permanent position, which is a huge increase from 4 years ago, where it's only 23% would increase in 23%. Comparing to 4 years ago. So there's a big increase in the acceptance of non-permanent position when it comes to applying for jobs amongst Korean graduates. Reasons are four reasons why they wanted to do it. First is a lot of pressure. They need to find a job, so then they would just try to get a job first. And second thing is they need to get experience, because they are smart enough to realize that companies do value work experience. And the final two reasons that cause this change is they need money. Financially, they need to get an income. which is aligned with how the survey I showed you, the result I showed you earlier, where Millennial and Gen Z are a lot more responsible when it comes to financially personal finance. And the final reason is they wanted to reduce the gap period between graduation and job and employment. So they are much more willing to apply for non-permanent position in 2021. So when we go deeper into checking in with them, so what are some of the important factors? What makes non-permanent position attractive for them, right? What's important for them? Actually, salary is not the top reason. Like, money is not the top reason. So this may be a surprise for some people. It was a little bit of a surprise for me. But the number one reason is the most important factors when they consider non-permanent position is the work itself. It's the kind of job that they would be doing, and it's the kind of responsibility that they will be given. That is the most important part. And the second most important thing is when they're considering a non-permanent job is there a possibility for them to convert into a full-time position with the same company? Followed by salary, and can they achieve better work-life balance? So this is a couple of things that are this is interesting in a sense that they do see non-permanent work as a way for them to build up their profile and portfolio. So that's why there's a huge emphasis on work, what kind of work they will be actually doing when it comes to the non-permanent position. However, there are some concerns coming from the job seekers when it comes to non-permanent jobs, non-permanent work. There are concerns between in regards to the perceptions of permanent and non-permanent work. They do worry that once they are working in a non-permanent position, then they are worried that they might have a future implication when it comes to the perceptions of working for a non-permanent job from future employers. And also at the same time, they do worry about how they will be seen internally in the company as a non-permanent employee, and also the potential employee compensation that they will be receiving while they're employed in a non-permanent position. So a couple of things to consider. I think the first one is the realization that even though non-permanent work itself, when they look at non-permanent work, the work itself can be the most attractive thing that they're looking for. So the experience that they are getting for Gen Z could be a unique attraction over salary and compensation itself. And the second thing I think is it happened we had some cases that where so we have to be aware of the internal dynamics between non-permanent employee and permanent employees. We have some cases where a company want to give non-permanent employees more attention or more benefit, and the permanent employee take offense to that. So if you do wanted to use non-permanent employee, or you wanted to provide a much better experience for them, then it does depending on your internal dynamic and your current situation internally when it comes to permanent and non-permanent employees. So you need to take consideration of that. So yeah, so these are some of the news when it comes to Gen Z and Millennial in Korea in the workplace regarding the perspective on career change, job change, and also the view on permanent job, something that I want to share with you. Some of you asked me before the sessions about remote working. So I'm going to get a little bit into that because it's something that I think impacts most of us when it comes to work. And I want to share with you some data and insight when it comes to remote working and Gen Z in Korea. So Salamin is a job portal. So recently in Korea, they did a survey and they found that 60% of new employee, Sinip Sawan, started their career remotely. So I think one of you asked me, when it comes to Gen Z, do they feel comfortable when it comes to remote working? Something to consider when it comes to Generation Z remote working is, especially those who enter the workplace this year, there's a good chance that they were actually educated remotely in the past year. Because if you think about university, a lot of universities are still remote teaching at the moment. So there's a good chance that they have a lot of experience when it comes to dealing with remote work. So they are definitely a lot more competent when it comes to remote working. They're a lot more comfortable when it comes to remote working, when it comes to Gen Z, more so than Millennial sometimes. Also, at the same time, they are quite comfortable in forming remote social circles already, due to their experience and due to how they use social media, and also because they have experienced remote working before they come into the workplace when it with the universities. And this seems to be aligned with the report from Deloitte when it comes to remote working. So again, there's a difference between Millennial and Gen Z. Most of them like remote working. Most of them are comfortable working in a remote setting. Something that I wanted to highlight is on the right hand side, the bottom one. So there's the only big difference between those two groups is when it comes to training, education, and skill development to enable employees to work remote more effectively. So millennials actually thinks that they need more training when it comes to working remotely, while Gen Z not so much, right? So I think that for us, there could be reason behind that is because, as I said earlier, millennials are stepping into leadership position. So there's a difference between doing work remotely and there's a difference between doing work remotely and there's a difference between managing team remotely. It's a two very, very different kind of an animal, right? It's a lot harder to manage a team when you are a manager remotely versus just doing work itself, right? So maybe that's the reason behind why. So Job Career did another survey on why career, how did millennials find remote working? One of the biggest difficulty for them is in defining work objectives. They find that working remotely is a lot more harder to have a clear objectives of work when it comes to working. So there are some good things and there are some bad things that they like about it. They like because they don't have to commute anymore. They also like that they don't have to be stressed out by social interaction. They don't have to go for company dinner as often because of remote working. However, they do find that it takes longer and more difficult to be orientated with team and companies. And also they find that leadership become a challenge itself when it comes to remote working. So there are opportunities for organization to implement more remote working skill training or leadership development related to remote working. And if remote working is something that you seriously consider for the longer term, then I think in one of the webinar on remote working, the head of people from Philip Morris, they actually talk about how they actually change the work relationship between employees and the office completely because of COVID-19, of the situation. So they said that the office is no longer a place to work. Office is a place to do teamwork. Office is a place to collaborate. If you want to do work, work can happen anywhere. But office, the purpose of office is teamwork. And it's a place to collaborate and do work together. If you're doing things alone, then you don't necessarily need to come to the office. So if you do want to think about implementing hybrid working or remote working in the long-term basis, then these are some of the things that you need to consider, right? Do people have the skills to manage people work, remote work, and also what is the office for, right? Do people come to the office because you just want to see them, or is it particular purpose for bringing people together into one physical space. So these are some of the things that I want to share with you regarding Gen Z and Millennial in Korea. No questions so far, but if you have any questions, just feel free to use the Q&A box or just use the chat box as well. Right? We will be keeping the eye on those too. Okay. Okay. So we got some time now. It's already 40 minutes past. So something that I want to share with you. It's a bit of a market research done by Millennial. So Millennial 20s Lab is a market research company in Korea, specialized in the 20대, in the 20 years old consumers, right? So they are I would say they are one of the leading research organization in Korea when it comes to Gen Z. And what they have created is a persona of Korean Gen Z in 2021. And so what you can see in this graph, well, in this illustration is the persona that they have used to describe Korean Gen Z. When it comes to their spending habit, when it comes to how they, who do they trust as a consumer, how do they form trust, how do they form relationship, and how do they get motivation from when it comes to social awareness, right? Purpose driven. So 4 things that they've highlighted in this Gen Z persona. So the spending habit is experience driven. So what that means is they would purchase experience. They would spend money on things that would give them an experience where they can capture and share on social medias. So when it comes to product, being able to experience the product and take a picture of it or take a video of it and being able to share it with the friends, with the community, that is extremely important for Gen Z. So that's the spending habit, is experience driven. And when it comes to trust, then it's very much content driven. So when I say content driven, what that means is they would trust content creator on social media over search engine result when they are doing product research or when they are looking for information. I'll share some example with you later on. And when it comes to relationship, then they would form topic interest-based relationship over traditional norm-based relationship with community that they will actively seek out to participate. So interest-based community become a very, very important part of Gen Z persona. And the final thing is social awareness. I think this is a worldwide thing with Gen Z as well, but Korean Gen Z as well. They are very, very socially aware. They would take proactive action on social media to enable them to make a change, to make things better in the society. So they are very much purpose driven, right? Again, I'll share some example with you later. So if you look at Gen Z in the workplace and how it translated the persona, how it translated to what they wanted to do when it comes to looking for work or the ideal workplace. So when it comes to experience driven, right? So I think SM Entertainment, they came up with a term, a Gen Z term. They call them a 실감 세대. So what that means is a realistic driven generation. They are very, very much looking for experience when it comes to their life, when it comes to work, and when it comes to the things that they buy. So when I talk about experience, this is the employee experience that I'm talking about. So employee experience is the interaction that they have with customers, company customers, when it comes to their managers and when it comes to the peers, and when it comes to the work environment, and also when it comes to the work itself, right? So if you compare that to the persona, right? I always ask people when it comes to the employee experience, would your employee take a picture or take a video of their daily life at work and share it on social media, right? Most of the time, I don't know. Maybe some of your employee would, maybe some of them won't, but this is the same kind of this is what I mean when it comes to employee experience, right? What they want is to be working a place where they would happily share the experience with their friends and family, right? So some company does it really well, right? So to give an example, people always take not people always, but some people I always sometimes see on LinkedIn or on social media, people take a picture of the Google cafeteria when they start working for Google. So when they would share it on social media. What they are sharing is not the food itself, right? But what they are sharing is the experience of the emotion of going to work and see that, oh, look at that. Look at this, all I can eat breakfast spread, right? Look at this experience that I'm experiencing. Look at this joy that I'm experiencing. I'm going to take a snapshot and then I'm going to share it on social media to tell people that, hey, this is the experience that I'm having, and this is awesome. And this is the kind of things that they are looking for in the workplace. It's not the food itself, right? But it's the experience and the associated emotion that the experience bring to them that they wanted to share. So question that you might want to ask yourself is, my employee, the employee in the organization, the team members that I work with, when they work with me, are there moments that is worth sharing for them, right? So this is a challenge, right, for you to think about for Gen Z. The second thing is the trust is come from the content, right? Trust no longer is come from hierarchy or information, right? Trust come from so the content provider, content creator is somebody that they can trust. The reason that they trust them is because there is a history of them providing value content to this person, right? So I'm going to show you some example later. So you might want to ask yourself when it comes to the information that you provide to the Gen Z, or even you as a leader, when it comes to communication with them, like, have I been providing the right content to them during the experience, right? Am I providing content that they can trust? So then, so do they trust my content that is my content out there for them to look at? Will that be have I gotten enough feedback to know that my content is good, that they would trust me when it comes to that? I'll show you some example. It's a little bit abstract right now, so I'll show you some example later on when it comes to content-driven trust. What does that mean when it comes to that and Gen Z? The final two things is relationship. Relationship is interest, community driven. So there's another Gen Z lingo, Gen Z slang is 가치관. 가치관 means like interest-based relationship. So relationship is a lot less formal now. Is different from previous generation where boundaries have an impact on how they form relationship. So a lot of the relationship is formed online. So how they make friends, how they participate in communities, very, very strongly based on what they're interested in themselves. So that provides some opportunities when it comes to work, right? So that could mean that when it comes to interest-based community, so you can form more interest-based community. When I say interest, doesn't necessarily have to be off-work interest, right? It could be work-based interest. It could be data analytic for skills-based interest, right? So you could form more opportunities for you to form cross-functional collaborations based on those interests. And the final thing is just social awareness and how they are driven by empowerment, how they take action by knowing if they wanted to make a bigger impact, then how they would take proactive action when it comes to empowerment and motivation, right? So let's go into, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example and what does that mean, right? So content-driven generation. So it's all about information that they can trust. So one particular example is, so when they do, so how do they find company information, right? So this is a bit of an interesting data that we found that when it comes to Gen Z in Korea, so let's say they want to find out more about a company. So who do they ask? How do they find information? So the first thing that they would do is they would ask friends and family. Do they know anybody who works for this company? or they would ask people that who are working in that company or people who used to work in this company. And the final two things is more important, more interesting, is they would search YouTube before they go to the company website. So they would actually go onto YouTube to look for this company information before they actually go to the company's official website. Part of it is what I talked about when it comes to content-based trust, right? Content-based trust. So what do they look for when they go to YouTube, right? So these are the things that they look for when it comes to YouTube, when they're doing research on companies. So they're looking for this kind of content creator to talk about what is it like to work for this company. What are some of the things that they should be aware of when it comes to applying for jobs, or when it comes to working for this particular type of company. So if you look at the views, these are pretty high view videos when it comes to that, right? So it goes from people giving advice on what you should do to people to content creator generating content on talking about what their life is like, vlogging about their life in this particular company, to some people that some of them a bit of a clickbait title, but how they like a day in my life working for a foreign company. So these are the things that Gen Z trusts more than a general search engine search, right? So this is some interview with a Cisco system manager in Korean HR, right? So these are the things that they look for, right? So yeah, so a couple of things you have to be aware of when it comes to providing information on a company level, when it comes to, I don't know, right, when it comes to attracting candidate, or when it comes to engaging your current employee, is it's beyond hierarchy. Who do they trust, right? Who do they trust? Take into consideration that online contents are very, very interactive in nature, right? There's immediate feedback, right? You can see dislike and like right away, and people can make comments on the content right away, right? So these are things that you might want to consider when it comes to being a leader, is to seek real-time feedback right away when it comes to your communication, or when it comes to your information that you pass on to your Generation Z in the workplace. Second thing that you want to consider is trust is not formed by authority, but value the content, right? So I said, where are your contents, right? Is it through your behaviors, or have you been, when it comes to, have you been generating content, right? So content doesn't mean that you have to create a YouTube channel, but content is just stuff that they can see and they can experience with you on a daily basis, right, as a leader. And on a company level is, where are the contents that they are receiving, right? Because how they use social media, there's a difference on how they use social media, right? So they use Instagram for graphic-based information, right? Because nobody would look at text in Instagram, right? So Instagram, they use it for product, right? For product, because it's a graphic interface. For Facebook, YouTube, they're looking for more in-depth information. They're looking for expert advice. And Twitter, because of the fast-paced nature of Twitter, they use Twitter for more conversation. They use Twitter for more conversation based on a particular topic because of the hashtag nature of Twitter, right? So you got to be aware when it comes to communicating with Gen Z, is not always just email, meeting, right? So you got to be aware of what kind of platform and how you're communicating with them when it comes to the information that you want to share with them. Another thing that I want to share with you, we have about 10 minutes left before our Q&A, is the social awareness and how they are purpose-driven when it comes to Generation Z in the workplace, and also when it comes to their personal life as well. So there's a term that I've been told amongst Gen Z is sohan ojirap. So ojirap means being nosy, but sohan means being kind. So I kind of just translate it to kindly interfering. Kindly interfering is among Gen Z, is you can call it social justice action, but there are some pretty good example of how Gen Z take proactive action to to create a bigger impact on society. One very good example is how they take action during COVID-19, right? One very good example is students. So these are students, programming students who launched a COVID tracking app, right? So remember back in 2020 April, there's this tracking app that helps people to track COVID-19 infection rate. So these came from Gen Z, right? These are students actually proactively create this app to help tracking COVID patient in the region. And eventually that took on to a much bigger piece of work that got translated into English, so foreigner can use it as well. So this is an example on how Gen Z taking proactive action to make a bigger impact on society. Another example is how they use Twitter to help a local government to help their local potato farmers. Because of COVID-19, nobody's buying potato. So nobody's going to restaurants. So a lot of the potato got stuck. Couldn't be sold. So the farmers are losing money. So what they did is they run. So the Gen Z took notice of that, and they did a lot of strong push on Twitter campaign to enable people to buy more potatoes to help out these farmers, right? I think somebody did something similar with carrots as well. So you can see that Gen Z do take proactive action when it comes to making a positive change in society. Something more recent, if you are active on Twitter, you might have noticed this particular hashtag trending in last week. So maybe it will take off. So I roughly translated this hashtag, Korean hashtag, into let's make useful work by making use of the major. So what it means is providing helpful advice based on the subject that you're studying right now. So the advice goes from how to book holiday trip to how to prevent hangover to this. I think the bottom one is my favorite advice, is to don't take any medical advice online, because you can't trust people on the internet, right? So these are things that, again, these are just Generation Z in Korea wanted to make a bigger impact with the skills. And these are things that we can utilize, right? And these are things that, these are the type of energy that you can harness in the workplace when it comes to empowerment thing, right? And when it comes to empowering Generation Z in the workplace, is because they want to make an impact. They want to do positive things. They want to do things that have a positive impact in the workplace. So help them understand what they do would have a bigger impact in the workplace. Align their objectives with the company objectives, right? What is the bigger picture? Do they know what they do have a bigger impact in the workplace? And also, the second thing is try to understand the career aspiration a little bit better for leaders. What drives them? What motivates them, right? Is it because they want to be expert in their field, or is it because they want to create certain impact in certain community, or because they want to make more money? So it's up to the leaders to find out a little bit more. And the better you can understand the aspiration, what drives them, the better you'll be able to motivate them. And so these are some of the things that I wanted to share with you. Got 5 more minutes. There's some question that I wanted to answer, but if you have some question now, you can use the Q&A box. Feel free to use put in some questions while I answer some of these questions. Somebody sent to me before this session, so thank you for sending those to me earlier. It allowed me to prepare much better. So I want to answer the first questions. What are the most important values other than money to consider when they choose a company? So thank you for your questions, and thank you for sending it earlier so I can prepare for it. So I want to answer this question by showing you a little bit of research, a survey that is done by Blind. So for those of you not in Korea, maybe you're not familiar with Blind. So Blind is an anonymous professional
networking platform in Korea and in some country as well. So what they do is they enable employees to share information anonymously. And also they enable employee to have topics to talk about their company behind privacy. So a lot of the time people use it to review company when they are applying for jobs. So what I want to share with you is a bit of research this platform has done when it comes to the top 10 companies that have the highest employee happiness. And maybe that will answer your question. So these are the top 10 companies when it comes to employee happiness, according to Blind. And the factor contributes to the employee happiness is in the orange box on the right. So when it comes to what makes people happy when it comes to work, so welfare and benefits, as you said, that is something that people do take importance in. However, there are something that repeatedly appear when it comes to contribution when it comes to employee happiness is the relationship that they have with their leaders, with their boss, and also that their work feels important and they are doing meaningful work. So I would say that when it comes to things that people look for more than compensation and money is that they feel that what they do is important. They feel that the work that they're doing has a bigger impact, and also the fact that they have a good relationship with their team and their manager. So that would be the things that I said I would consider important when it comes to the company that they want to apply to. Is purpose-driven work, right? I think we talked about that earlier, and also have a workplace that they feel they have a good relationship with their team, and also fair compensation and benefit. Obviously, that's important, and increasingly there's an emphasis on mental well-being as well. So these are some of the things that I would say will be important when it comes to people looking for work. So I hope that answers your question. And your other question was about remote working. I think we talked about that earlier in the webinar. Prefer leadership style. I think leadership style, I think we talked a little bit about that. I think, oh no, we didn't have the chance to talk about leadership. I think leadership style, I think is the trust that you need to build based on you as a leader. Have you provide an experience? Have you provide content that they can trust when it comes to your interaction with them? Do you get a feedback, right? Do you get a feedback in real time? Do you constantly ask for feedback from them? Because they are very used to giving feedback when it comes to the interaction that they have online. So I think those are the leadership things that, those are the leadership quality that's important is somebody that they can trust, and also somebody that gather feedback regularly from them. I think those will be the important things when it comes to Gen Z leadership style. So we have ran out of time today, and I will not hold you back further. You're a very busy individual. So what I will share with you is the presentation and the recording of this webinar through email. And if you have any questions, then feel free to contact us. And so hopefully this is the first time that we're running this session, and we do aim to run this on a regular basis. So please sign up for the next one. And if you have any feedback, or if there's particular questions or insight that you wanted us to find out, then please let us know through our contact us through our LinkedIn, or go to our website, or contact with me personally on LinkedIn. If there's any expectation that you wanted to have regarding the upcoming session. So thank you for your time, and have a wonderful afternoon, and hopefully I'll see you in July.